Now let's take a look at some of the tools available for editing envelopes. There's a little difference between editing in track or using the lanes, and automation is also the same for buzzers and tracks and editing synth automation. I'll be using a lane for most of the demonstration, and if there are any differences, I'll mention as we come across them. I mentioned earlier that nodes can be moved, and to do that, we left-click on a node and drag it to its new position. Moving nodes will follow any current snap settings. There's also a vertical snap mode available for nodes, and that's invoked by holding down the control key. I hold down the control key and click on this node. As I move it up, you'll see that it snaps to various points within the envelope, and snap points to the previous node and any previous flat line sections if there are any. If I select just the one node and start moving that up, you'll notice that the flat line section early in the envelope has highlighted to indicate the current node is snapping to its level. And as I continue moving it, you'll see it snaps to the flat line section at the front, which has changed colour to indicate that. If I continue, it will then snap to the previous node. That can be quite handy for setting levels. Nodes can be constrained in the direction they move as well by holding down the Shift key before starting to move the cursor in the desired direction. For example, hold the Shift key, left-click and drag down. That node will only now go up and down. I can't move it from left to right. If I release that and do the same again, but this time move left to right, I can move it backwards and forwards in time, but I can't move it up and down in level. As we've seen, left-clicking on a node selects it, plus right-clicking, lasso will select nodes as well. A selected node is darker in colour, and once selected can be moved by dragging as we've just seen. They can be deleted by pressing delete or switching to the erase tool and clicking on one of the selection. And there's also a right pop-up menu that's invoked by right-clicking on the node for the node menu, where it can be reset, deleted. The envelope can be reassigned to a different envelope, acts a bit like an edit filter, or the envelope can be deleted, or all nodes can be cleared. There's also access to the properties, which gives us the property of the currently selected node. Right-clicking over the segment produces a slightly different menu, where we can choose to have a jump setting, where the levels suddenly change from one to the other. Linear, which is the straight line setting it was on. Fast curve, which means it starts to change quickly and then gradually reduces. Or a slow curve, which means the change starts slowly and then gradually increases. Again, the envelope can be reassigned from here or deleted. There are a couple of methods available for moving a line segment. Either hold down the control key, click on the line segment and then left drag up and down. Or alternatively, move to the hotspot at the very top where you'll see the line segment tool appears. Left click above the segment you want to move and then click on one of the nodes. Move them up and down as required. This line segment tool can also be used to insert nodes at selection. Simply make a sweep selection, move it to the top, left click, then drag up or down. That makes sudden changes very quick and easy to add. This will also work on existing nodes. Left click above the segment, but instead of selecting one of the two nodes, left click and drag up and down. We have nodes added at selection, and the change will be sudden. Notice that all the time the cursor is giving us visual feedback on what's going to happen. At the very top, as I say, we have the line segment tool. When we're over a node, we can see that we've only got one node. If we lasso select so there's more than one node selected, you'll see that the cursor changes to multi-node. This helps us to keep track of what we have selected. As we've just seen, there's two hot zones. There's one towards the top where we have the line segment tool and one at the bottom where we can sweep select time. We can also use this to affect the whole envelope. If there's no time selection at all, as there isn't now, left-clicking at the top here, dragging up and down, will move the whole envelope. It's a very quick way of making an overall adjustment to a complex envelope. Notice as well using this method, if any of the nodes reach -infinity at the bottom, they shrink down, but as we start to go back up again, their original positions are reinstated. They're not altered completely. It's also possible to work on several envelopes at once in this method, just by left-click and dragging across the required lanes. Then any adjustments made to one affect all. Possible to multi-select nodes as well, then moving one selected node will move them all. All of the edit tools also support multiple track selection, meaning that any active envelopes on selected tracks within a selecting range will be affected by editing one of the tracks. For example, if I select a time range on the pan envelope in this guitar track, that time range is selected and indicated in a time ruler. And also the automation lanes selection button is lit. I can now come down to this other guitar line, hold the control key down and click the selection button. And now if I move any of the selected nodes, the envelope in the other lane follows that movement. Holding a cursor over an envelope or node gives us information on that current envelope or node, such as the type and its current level. Clip envelopes are similar to track envelopes, but only operate on individual clips. There aren't as many options available, and choices on audio clips are limited to gain and pan, plus any automatable parameters or effects in the clip effects bin. That's selected by using the edit filter. Only this time we select clip automation. Saying again to this first one. Note that an envelope appears to cover the whole track, but it will only be applied to any clip that you edit the envelope in. As soon as the edit filter is changed, the envelope disappears from any clips where it hasn't been edited. I'll demonstrate that by creating an envelope on this clip and then changing the edit filter to clips. And now you can see the ghosted envelope is on this clip, but it doesn't exist on the others, as there wasn't one created. One handy tip here is if you need a gain envelope on a clip, hold the control key down while click dragging in the smart zone at the top of the clip, and this will insert the envelope automatically. The rest of clip automation works in a very similar method to the way we've just looked at in the lanes with track automation. We looked at using the copy special and paste dialogues earlier, but it's worth reiterating some of that here. To copy envelopes, we need to select either the track or lanes that the envelopes we want to copy are on. This can be the whole track, or a selected time selection, or a selected time selection of certain envelopes. For example, I'm going to click drag through the volume envelope, the pan envelope, and the reverb send level, but not the chorus send level. Once that's selected, I can then either select Edit Copy Special from the menu, or press Ctrl Alternate C, or right-click and select Edit Copy. That opens the copy dialog, and as you can see, the track bus automation option's already checked. That's the only one available because that's the only data selected. We click on OK. We can now do several things with that. We can either move to a point in this track, insert the now time, and then select Edit Paste, or press Ctrl V. That automation's inserted at the insert point, noticing that it overwrites any existing automation. Alternatively, we can move to a completely different area of the project, such as to a bus, which I'll do by switching screen sets. Clicking on the now time where you want it inserted, and I'll just insert this on my master bus by right-clicking and selecting Paste. As you can see, the automation's pasted. Obviously, if it's automation of a type that's not allowed on a bus, such as clip automation, that won't be pasted. Of course, if we want to use the paste special options to increase the number of repetitions, we can do that as well. Let's rewind to the start of this project. Instead of selecting Edit Paste, I'm going to use the alternate Ctrl V to bring up the paste box. Increase the repetitions to 2, check that we're on the master bus, then click OK. As you can see, it's now pasted 2 copies of that sequentially in the track. Remember, the settings for that can be changed, and we looked at that earlier in the cut, copy and paste section. Just before we leave automation, it's worth explaining as well, of course, that for automation to be followed, the read button on a track does need to be on, which it is by default. If you find that automation isn't responding as you'd expect, check the state of the read button. So far, we've only worked in envelope mode. In envelope mode, controls respond to envelope levels as long as automation read on a track is on. Offset mode is the alternative mode, and this is used to make changes to levels while maintaining any relative existing envelope levels. The track will still respond to active envelopes, but the controls will not reflect the changes, allowing us to use the controls to offset the envelopes. Where offset mode can come in handy is making overall changes to a track. For example, if we've written lots of complicated automation and then decide that the whole track is slightly too loud all through the project, we need to turn it down slightly overall. It'd be a real pain to have to change every single node, and one of the alternatives available is to make the change in offset mode. So let's have a look at how we do that. To enter offset mode, press O on the keyboard or click on the offset mode indicator in the mix module. A few things to notice when we first enter offset mode. The offset indicator in the mix module lights to indicate we're in that mode. And also notice that the controls now have a plus sign beside their name. And all of the controls have jumped to Unity regardless of their previous setting. The reason that controls are at Unity is that we haven't offset any of them yet. So let's look at this guitar track. We'll switch back to envelope mode and see in this mode there's a starting level of -9.8 decibels. It then follows any track automation that's on the track, and we can see the volume envelope by shift clicking on it. It takes a bit of a fall before levelling out and then goes on to do its thing. This is purely to demonstrate how offset works. So let's switch back to offset mode and have a listen to playback. I'll solo that guitar. While it's playing back, watch what's happening to the volume control on the track. You can hear that it's responding to the volume envelope and the pan controls and all of the others, but none of the controls are reflecting that. Note that the track's numeric indicator peaks at around -2.8 dB. Now let's use the volume control in offset mode to reduce the volume by 2 dB. That has the effect of lowering the whole track. When we switch back to envelope mode, you'll see that the controls still show their earlier settings, but in actual fact levels are now 2 decibels lower than previously. We've offset the volume by -2 dB. If I press play, you'll see that the peak indicator, instead of finishing at -2.8, will finish lower. There you can see it's about 2 decibels lower, which is because we've offset it. In the same way that envelope mode changes are not shown by controls in offset mode, changes made in this mode are not reflected in the controls once the mode is exited, and this can catch users out if levels have been changed in offset accidentally. If at any point you have unexpected level settings and no obvious reason as to why, it's worth switching to offset mode to make sure that no offsets have been applied there. If I switch back to offset mode, you can see that the volume fader is down by 2.1 decibels. If we'd accidentally dragged that all the way down in offset mode and then switch back to envelope mode, when we play the track now, we get complete silence with no obvious reason as to why. That's to be expected because we've offset the volume completely in offset mode. All we need to do is to return to that mode, raise the volume fader back to Unity, switch back to envelope mode, and when I press play, the volume is now back. Hopefully that explains the difference between offset and envelope mode.